I kept that chipped red debit card in a shoebox for 7 years, refusing to touch the charity of the man who discarded me. But when I finally walked into the bank to close the account and take the $10,000 for my mother, the teller went pale. She leaned in, her voice shaking, and whispered that I should not withdraw it there because someone had been waiting 7 years for me to make that very mistake. My name is Skyla Morales, and if you looked at me standing in the air-conditioned purgatory of this downtown Tampa bank branch, you would see exactly what the world sees. A woman in her mid-30s who looks 5 years older, a woman clutching a knockoff designer handbag that is peeling at the strap, revealing the gray cardboard truth underneath the fake leather. A woman who does not belong here among the polished marble floors and the soft hum of transactions that involve more zeros than I have seen in a decade. The air inside smelled of carpet cleaner and old money, a sharp contrast to the humid, suffocating soup of Florida heat I had just stepped out of. My blouse was sticking to my lower back. I could feel a bead of sweat tracing a slow, cold line down my spine, but it was not because of the humidity. It was the fear. The kind of primal, animalistic fear that comes when you are cornered, not by a predator, but by simple, brutal mathematics. My phone vibrated against my hip bone, a relentless, angry buzz that had started at 8 in the morning and had not stopped since. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. It was either the landlord, Mr. Henderson, who had told me yesterday that if I did not have $1,800 by 5 this afternoon, my belongings would be on the curb before the streetlights came on, or it was the number listed as private caller, the polite euphemism for the loan sharks who had fronted me the cash for my mother's last round of dialysis. They charged 30% interest a week, a rate that made me want to vomit every time I did the mental calculation. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. Pride doesn't pay rent. That was what I kept telling myself. Pride does not buy insulin. Pride does not keep the lights on. My fingers were wrapped so tightly around the object in my pocket that the edges were digging into my palm. It was a red debit card. The plastic was scratched, the magnetic strip worn, and the red paint chipped away at the corners to reveal the white base. It looked like trash. It looked like something you find in a gutter. But to me, it was a 7-year-old artifact of humiliation. I had kept it in a shoebox under my bed, buried beneath a stack of unpaid medical bills and a few photographs I could not bring myself to burn. 7 years, 2,555 days. That is how long it had been since Alec Reynolds threw this card into a puddle at my feet and told me to take the $10,000 inside it as payment for my wasted youth. $10,000. That number echoed in my head, bouncing off the vaulted ceiling of the bank. To Alec, $10,000 was a rounding error. It was a weekend trip to the vineyard. It was a new set of tires for his Porsche. To me, right now, standing in this line behind a man who smelled of expensive sandalwood soap and arrogance, $10,000 was life. It was a roof. It was safety. It was the difference between my mother sleeping in a bed or on a stretcher in a charity ward. But using it meant he won. Using it meant admitting that Skyla Morales, who had walked away with her head high and her heart bleeding, had failed. It was an admission that I was exactly what he treated me, like a charity case, a discard. "Next guest, please," a voice called out. Sharp and tinny, I snapped my head up. The line had moved. It was my turn. I walked toward the counter, my legs feeling heavy, like I was wading through wet cement. The teller was young, maybe 22. Her name tag read Tiffany. She had perfect, acrylic nails painted a soft pastel pink, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail so tight it looked painful. She glanced up from her computer, and I saw the assessment happen in real time. She saw the fraying cuffs of my blazer. She saw the dark circles under my eyes that no amount of drugstore concealer could hide. She saw the peeling bag. Her smile did not reach her eyes. It was a customer service mask, thin and brittle. "How can I help you today?" she asked, her tone suggesting she doubted I had any business being there at all. I swallowed the lump of bile in my throat. I pulled the red card from my pocket and placed it on the cool granite counter. It looked pathetic sitting there, a scarred piece of red plastic against the pristine stone. I placed my driver's license next to it. "I need to close this account," I said. My voice sounded raspy, foreign to my own ears. I cleared my throat and tried to sound stronger, more like the woman I used to be before life dismantled me. "I want to withdraw the full balance, all $10,000, and then I want to close it." Tiffany looked at the card, then back at me. Her eyebrows twitched upward, a microscopic expression of judgment. Who carries a card this old? Who leaves $10,000 sitting in a debit account for 7 years without touching it? "Do you have the PIN?" she asked, picking up the card with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "Yes," I said. "It is my birthday." Alex's final insult. "Password is your birthday. Easy for you to remember." Tiffany slid the card into the reader attached to her keyboard. She began to type, her long nails clicking rhythmically against the keys. Click, clack, click. I held my breath. Part of me expected the machine to beep and reject it. Part of me expected the account to be empty. A final cruel joke Alec had played to ensure that even if I crawled back, there would be nothing there. Then, the clicking stopped. Silence. I watched Tiffany. She was staring at her screen. The polite, dismissive boredom had vanished from her face. Her eyes had widened, the whites visible all around the irises. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed, her jaw working as if she were trying to chew on words that were too big to swallow. She blinked rapidly. She reached out and hit the backspace key, then typed something again, harder this time. Click, click, click. She stopped again. All the color drained from her face, leaving her pale beneath the bronzer on her cheeks. Her hands, which had been steady a moment ago, were now trembling. She pulled them away from the keyboard and placed them in her lap. Out of sight, but I could see her shoulders shaking. "Is there a problem?" I asked. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Look, if the card is expired, I have my ID. The money is there. It has to be there." Tiffany did not answer me. She did not even look at me. She was staring at the monitor as if she had just seen a ghost. Slowly, her hand reached under the counter. I heard the soft, muffled chime of a silent summons. My stomach dropped. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. Was it illegal? Had Alec reported the card stolen 7 years ago? Was I about to be arrested for trying to steal $10,000? I looked around wildly. The security guard by the door was looking at his phone, unbothered, but the atmosphere at the counter had shifted. The air felt charged, heavy with static. "Ma'am, please," I whispered, leaning in. "I just need the money for my mother. If there is a fee, just take it out, please." "Ms. Morales," a deep voice boomed from my left. I jumped. A man had appeared from the glass-walled offices behind the teller line. He moved with a speed that seemed unnatural for a bank manager. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car, but his forehead was glistening with sweat. His name tag read, Mr. Vance, branch manager. He did not look at me like I was a woman with a peeling bag. He looked at me like I was a bomb that was about to go off. "Mr. Vance," Tiffany squeaked, her voice trembling. "I just entered the card number in the system. I know, Tiffany. I saw the alert on my terminal," Mr. Vance said, cutting her off. He turned to me. His smile was wide, terrified, and stretched too thin. It was the kind of smile you give a hostage-taker. "Ms. Morales, Skyla, please, accept my apologies for the wait. We absolutely can assist you with this transaction, but for a withdrawal of this nature, we really must move to a more private setting. Security protocols, you understand." "It is just $10,000, I said, my voice rising. I stepped back, clutching my bag. "I don't need a private setting, Danae. Just give me the cash. I have bills to pay by 5 o'clock. "Ms. Morales, please," Mr. Vance said, and he actually bowed his head slightly. He wiped his brow with a handkerchief he had pulled from his pocket. His hands were shaking too. "If you could just follow me to the VIP suite, I assure you, we can expedite everything there. We just cannot do this at the counter. The system won't allow it." I looked from the terrified teller to the sweating manager. Something was wrong. This wasn't how you treated a broke woman closing a dormant account. This was how you treated royalty, or a threat. "Is the money legal?" I blurted out. Is there something wrong with the money?" "The funds are perfectly secure." "Mister," Vance said quickly, too quickly. "Please, come with me." He gestured toward the heavy oak door at the far end of the lobby, the one with the frosted glass that separated the regular people from the high-net-worth individuals. I hesitated. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to grab my ID and bolt out the door into the heat, but the thought of my mother's face, pale and in pain, anchored my feet to the floor. I needed that $10,000. I had swallowed my pride to get here. I could swallow my fear for 10 more minutes. I reached for my card on the counter. Tiffany's hand shot out and covered it. Her skin was ice cold. I looked at her, startled. "Mister." Vance had already turned and was walking briskly toward the VIP room, assuming I would follow. He was 10 feet away. Tiffany leaned over the counter. She did not look at my face. She looked past me, scanning the lobby, scanning the street outside the glass windows. Then she locked eyes with me. Her expression was no longer disdainful. It was urgent, desperate. She lowered her voice to a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. "Don't withdraw it here," she hissed. The words were a sharp intake of breath. "You don't understand. Someone is waiting for you to do this." "What?" I whispered back. "He is waiting," she said, her eyes darting to the manager's retreating back. "Go to the room, but don't take the cash. If you take the cash, it triggers the signal." "Ms. Morales," Mr. Vance called out from the open door of the VIP room. He sounded strained. "Right this way, please." Tiffany yanked her hand back as if she had been burned. She pushed the red card toward me, her face returning to a mask of blank professionalism. But her eyes were screaming a warning. I took the card. My fingers were numb. "Someone is waiting." The words rattled in my skull. Who was waiting Alec? After 7 years. Why would he care if I took the pittance he threw at me? I turned and walked toward the VIP room. My legs felt disconnected from my body. I felt like I was walking onto a stage where a play was already in progress, and I was the only one who had not read the script. I stepped into the office. It was silent inside. The roar of the outside world, the stress of the lobby, all of it vanished instantly. The carpet was thick, swallowing the sound of my cheap shoes. There was a smell of rich mahogany and fresh lilies from a vase on the desk. Mr. Vance was standing behind a massive desk, typing furiously on a keyboard. He gestured to a leather chair that looked like it cost more than my entire apartment building. "Please sit," he said. "I am just bypassing the dormant account lock. It requires 2-factor authorization from the central branch." I sat on the edge of the chair, clutching my bag to my chest. "I just want the 10,000, I said again. "That's all Alec left me. Just give it to me, Mr. Vance stopped typing. He looked up at me, and for a second, his professional mask slipped. He looked at me with genuine confusion, and something that looked like pity. 10,000, he repeated softly. He pressed a key and turned the large, high-definition monitor toward me. "Ms. Morales," he said, his voice dropping to a hush. "I am not sure what you were told 7 years ago, but this account is not a standard checking account." I looked at the screen. The numbers swam before my eyes for a moment before snapping into focus. I ignored the balance for a second, my eyes drawn to the account name at the top. Reynolds Morales Trust. And right below it, a line of red text flashing softly. Status active. Condition release upon beneficiary's appearance. Year 7. My breath hitched in my throat. Year 7. Today was the anniversary. To the day. "What does that mean?" I whispered. What is year 7? Mr. Vance folded his hands on the desk. It means, he said, that this account was programmed to remain dormant and accumulating until exactly 7 years from the date of deposit, and it means that the moment you walked in here and swiped that card, a notification was sent. Sent to who? I asked, though the cold dread in my stomach already knew the answer. Mr. Vance didn't answer. He just pointed at the screen. You are not here to close a $10,000 account. Ms. Morales, you are here to activate the trust. I stared at the words, year 7, blinking on the screen. It wasn't just money, it was a timer. I had thought I was hiding from Alec Reynolds for 7 years, nursing my wounds in the dark. But as I sat in that freezing cold room, the truth washed over me with the force of a tidal wave. I hadn't been hiding, I had been waiting, and he had known exactly when I would arrive. The air in the VIP room was sterile and dry, conditioned to a perfect 68 degrees. But suddenly I could not breathe. The walls of the bank dissolved into gray mist. The smell of expensive lilies and mahogany vanished, replaced by the scent of wet asphalt, ozone, and the metallic tang of imminent thunder. The silence of the room was drowned out by the roar of a memory so loud it made my teeth ache. I was not in Tampa anymore. I was back in St. Petersburg, standing on the bottom step of the county courthouse. It was exactly 7 years ago. The sky had torn open that afternoon. It was not just rain, it was a punishment, the kind of Florida storm that turns the world into a gray, drowning watercolor painting. I was standing there, shivering in a dress that was too thin for the sudden temperature drop, clutching a manila envelope against my chest. Inside were the divorce papers, the ink barely dry, the judge's signature a fresh scar on the pages. The paper was already damp, warping under my fingers, dissolving just like the vows we had made 5 years earlier. I was waiting for my Uber, or maybe I was just waiting for the ground to open up and swallow me whole. I cannot recall the logic of that moment, only the feeling of being entirely hollowed out. Then, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. It moved silently, like a shark gliding through dark water. It was a brand new model, the kind that cost more than the house my parents grew up in. The window rolled down. But he did not speak from the safety of the interior. The door opened. Alec Reynolds stepped out. He did not have an umbrella. He did not need one. He looked as if the elements themselves were afraid to touch him. He was wearing a long black trench coat, tailored to fit his broad shoulders perfectly. The collar turned up against the wind. His hair was slicked back, dark and severe, but it was his eyes that froze the blood in my veins. For 5 years, those eyes had looked at me with warmth, with laughter, with a desire that made me feel like the only woman on earth. Now, they were steel, cold, hard, impenetrable steel. They swept over me, taking in my shivering frame, my ruined hair, the pathetic way I was hugging the divorce papers as if they were a lifeline. He looked at me with disdain, pure, unadulterated contempt, or at least, that is what I told myself I saw. Beneath the contempt, there was something else, a tightness in his jaw, a flicker of muscle near his temple that looked like he was in pain, like he was forcing himself to be this monster. But the rain was too heavy, and I was too hurt to analyze the micro-expressions of the man who had just destroyed my life. He walked toward me, stopping just out of arm's reach. The distance was deliberate. It was a chasm he had dug between us. "Alec," I said. My voice was a broken whisper, lost in the sound of the downpour. "Why?" It was the only question I had left. Why the sudden coldness? Why the forensic audit of our marriage? Why the lawyers who descended like vultures? He did not answer. He did not even blink. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat. I flinched, a pathetic reflex, thinking he might hand me another legal notice, another restraining order, another document detailing how unworthy I was. Instead, he pulled out a card. It was red, a bright, offensive red against the gray backdrop of the storm. He held it up between 2 fingers. looking at it as if it were a piece of contaminated waste. He did not hand it to me. He did not extend his arm. He looked me dead in the eye, his expression completely void of humanity, and he opened his fingers. The card fell. I watched it in slow motion. It tumbled through the air. Catching the light of the street lamps that had just flickered on, it landed face down in a puddle of oily, muddy water at my feet. A splash of dirty water hit my ankle. The silence that followed was louder than the thunder. He wanted me to bend. He wanted me to kneel in the dirt and the filth to retrieve his charity. He was testing to see how much dignity I had left, or perhaps he was trying to strip away the last shred of it. "The password is your birthday," he said. His voice was flat, monotone. It was not the voice of the man who had whispered promises to me in the dark. It was the voice of a stranger reading a script. "There is $10,000 on it," he continued, speaking slowly, ensuring every syllable landed like a blow. "Consider it payment for your youth, for the time you wasted." The air left my lungs. Payment for my youth, as if I were a service provider, as if our marriage, our memories, the mornings we spent cooking breakfast, the nights we spent planning a future, were just a transaction that he was now closing out with a severance package. "Do not ever appear before me again," he said. The finality of it was brutal. He turned on his heel, his movements sharp and military. He did not look back. He walked toward the waiting car, and that was when I saw her. The rear window of the sedan was tinted, but the interior light was on. Sitting there, dry and warm and safe, was a woman. She was beautiful in that terrifying, manufactured way, perfect blonde hair that defied the humidity, a structured white blazer that looked crisp and expensive. She was looking out the window at me. She did not look angry. She did not look jealous. She looked at me with a detached curiosity, like one might look at a piece of roadkill on the highway. A mixture of pity and revulsion. She was the replacement, the upgrade, the visual confirmation that I was the draft copy, and she was the published novel. Alex slid into the car beside her. The heavy door thudded shut, sealing them in their world of wealth and silence, leaving me outside in the noise and the cold. I stood there, staring at the taillights as the car pulled away, splashing more water onto the sidewalk. The red card lay in the puddle, half submerged. My brain screamed at me to leave it. "Walk away, Skyla. Leave it in the mud where it belongs. Do not touch his money. Do not let him buy your pain." But my body moved on its own. My knees bent. I crouched down, the wet concrete soaking through my shoes. I reached into the murky water and plucked the card out. It was cold and slippery. I wiped it on the side of my dress, smearing mud on the fabric. But I did not care. I did not pick it up because I wanted the money. I did not pick it up because I was greedy. I picked it up because it was a weapon. I gripped it so hard the plastic bit into my skin. I wanted to keep it. I wanted to freeze this moment, this absolute nadir of my existence, and crystallize it into something hard and sharp. I would keep this card. I would hold on to it until the day I could throw it back in his face. I would make sure that one day I would stand before him not as the broken girl in the rain, but as a woman who did not need his $10,000. I watched the car disappear around the corner, blending into the gray traffic of First Avenue. "I will make you regret this," I whispered to the rain. "I will survive this, and I will make you watch." The drive home, no, not home. Back to the temporary efficiency apartment I was renting was a blur. I sat in the back of a taxi that smelled of stale tobacco, shivering uncontrollably. When I got to my room, I stripped off the wet clothes and threw them in the trash. I could never wear them again. They carried the stench of that moment. Then, I began the purge. I sat on the floor with my phone. My fingers were numb, but my resolve was burning hot. I opened my contacts. Alec Reynolds. Delete. Block. I went to my photos. 5 years of digital memories. Birthdays. Anniversaries. The trip to Cabo where we got sunburned and laughed until we cried. The photo of us painting the living room of our first house. I selected them all. every single one. My thumb hovered over the trash icon. A sob caught in my throat, a physical blockage that hurt more than the cold. But I forced it down. Delete. I went to social media. I unfriended every mutual friend, his college roommate, his sister, who I had loved like my own, his business partners, even the acquaintances we only saw at Christmas parties. I severed the digital arteries that connected us. I wanted to be a ghost to them. If I was trash to him, then I would be trash that vanished. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me struggle on a timeline. I would not let him see me cry in a status update. I took the red card and placed it in an old shoebox. I threw the muddy divorce papers in there with it. I added the few physical photos I had not been able to destroy, the ones that were too real, too tangible to burn just yet. I slid the box under my bed, and then the real war began. For 7 years, that box sat there. It was a landmine beneath my sleep. There were nights when the hunger was a physical animal clawing at my stomach. I remember a Tuesday in November of the second year. I had lost my job at the diner because the manager wanted someone younger. Someone who smiled more. I had $12 to my name. My refrigerator contained a jar of pickles and half a loaf of stale bread. I lay on the floor, staring at the dust bunnies under the bed, knowing that just inches away lay $10,000. It would have been so easy. I could have walked to an ATM. I could have bought groceries. I could have paid the heating bill that was 3 months overdue. I could have bought a winter coat that didn't have holes in the pockets. I pulled the box out. I opened it. I took the card out and held it up to the singular light bulb swinging from the ceiling. Payment for your youth. The voice was as clear as if he were standing in the room. If I used it, I accepted the transaction. If I spent 1 cent, I was agreeing that my love, my life, my 5 years of devotion were worth exactly $10,000. I was agreeing that I was a prostitute who had just been paid for a long-term contract. I put the card back. I ate a pickle and went to bed hungry. I did this a dozen times. When my car broke down and I had to walk 4 miles to work in the heat. When I had a tooth infection and pulled the tooth out myself with pliers and whiskey because I couldn't afford a dentist. When my mother got sick the first time. Every time. I opened the box. Every time. I looked at the red paint, chipping away more with each year, just like my hope. And every time. I put it back. It was not courage. It was spite. It was a dark, twisting, ugly spite that kept me warm when the heater failed. I would starve before I let Alec Reynolds feed me. I would bleed before I let him buy me a bandage. The memory faded, receding back into the dark corners of my mind. But the image that anchored it remained. The final frame of that film that played on a loop in my nightmares. Alec turning his back, in my memory, for 7 years. I had edited that moment. I had added a sneer to his lips. I had added a bounce to his step, a skip of joy that he was finally free of the burden of me. I had convinced myself that he walked away with lightness. But sitting here in the bank, with the words, Year 7, glowing on the monitor, the memory shifted. I saw it again, unedited. I saw the way his shoulders had slumped the moment he turned away. I saw the hesitation in his step before he opened the car door. I saw the way his hand had gripped the roof of the car, white-knuckled, as if he needed the support to keep from falling. And I wondered, for the first time in 2,555 days, if I had been wrong. I wondered if he had walked away not because he hated me, but because he couldn't bear to look at what he was doing to me. I looked up at Mr. Vance, the bank manager, my eyes adjusting back to the present, back to the VIP room. The ghost of the rain was still cold on my skin. Year 7, I said, my voice steady now, hardened by the memory. Tell me exactly what that means. The last 7 years of my life have not been a story. They have been a geography of desperate places. I can map my history by the zip codes that got progressively worse, by the smell of the hallways in the apartment complexes where the buzzers never worked and the elevators smelled of bleach and urine. I moved 4 times. Each move was a retreat, a tactical withdrawal from a city that was becoming too expensive for a woman alone to survive in. I became a ghost in the machine of the American economy. I was the person who poured your drink at the dive bar on 4th Street, smiling when you grabbed my wrist, hoping you would leave a $5 tip so I could buy laundry detergent. I was the shadow dropping off your pad thai at 11 at night, praying my radiator would not blow before I got back to the other side of town. I did data entry for a logistics firm, typing until my carpal tunnel felt like fire running up my forearms, only to be replaced by a software update 2 months later. Then I landed the job at Cedar Line Risk Review. It sounded professional. It sounded like a career. I put on a blazer from Goodwill and sat in a cubicle under humming fluorescent lights, processing insurance claims. For 6 months, I thought I had stabilized. I thought I had finally clawed my way up to the bottom rung of the middle class. But poverty is gravity. It is not something you escape. It is something you constantly fight against. And the moment you stop kicking, it pulls you back down. The gravity that pulled me down was my mother. Her diagnosis came in the 3rd year. Kidney failure, complicated by a heart condition that required a pharmacy's worth of medication every month. The American healthcare system is designed to strip mine your soul. We had insurance, but the deductibles were a joke. The copays were $50 here, $80 there. Then came the out-of-network anesthesiologist. Then came the coverage gap. I watched my paycheck evaporate before it even hit my bank account. I stopped buying fresh produce. I stopped turning on the air conditioning. Even in August, when the Florida heat turned my apartment into a kiln, I started rationing my own meals so I could afford her iron supplements. And when the math finally broke, when the incoming money was 0 and the outgoing money was $3,000, I did what desperate people do. I went to a storefront in a strip mall, sandwiched between a pawn shop and a liquor store. The sign said, Swift Capital Solutions. It was clean, bright, and the man behind the desk smiled like a shark. It was a payday loan wrapped in legal jargon. They gave me $5,000 to cover Mom's surgery deposit. The interest rate was something that should have been illegal 300% annually. Compounded daily if I missed a payment. I signed the papers. I effectively signed over my freedom for a bag of saline and a surgeon's time. Through all of this, the red debit card sat in the shoebox under my bed. It became a totem, a twisted religious artifact. There were nights when I was so hungry my stomach cramped, and I would pull the box out. I would stare at that chipped red plastic. I knew that with a 4-digit code my birthday I could walk into a grocery store and buy a rotisserie chicken, a bag of apples, a bottle of wine. I could fill my tank with gas. I could pay the shark at Swift Capital, but I would not do it. To spend that money was to admit that Alec was right. It was to admit that I was incapable of surviving without him. It was to admit that my value was exactly what he had appraised it at. So I ate instant noodles, I drank tap water, I worked double shifts, and I hated him with a purity that kept me warm. However, as the years ground on, I began to notice something, a pattern, a series of anomalies in the chaotic data of my life. It started with the landlord at the second apartment. Mr. Henderson was a man who would evict his own grandmother for being a day late. I was 2 weeks late on rent, terrified, packing my boxes, waiting for the sheriff. Then, I got a call. Mr. Henderson told me, in a voice that sounded strained and unnatural, that he was granting me a one-time extension. No late fee. He hung up before I could thank him. 6 months later, I was driving my beat-up Corolla to the pharmacy. I was exhausted, my eyes blurring. I rear-ended a Mercedes at a stoplight. I got out, shaking, knowing that my insurance had lapsed 3 days prior. This was it. I was going to be sued. I was going to lose my license. The driver of the Mercedes got out, a large man in a suit. He looked at the damage, looked at my license plate, and then looked at his phone. He tapped out a message. Then he looked at me and said, "Don't worry about it. It is just a scratch." He got back in his car and drove away. Then there was the hospital. A bill for $4,000 that was sent to collections suddenly vanished. When I called billing, the woman on the phone sounded confused. She said it had been adjusted by a charitable grant that I had never applied for. At first, I thought it was God. Then I thought it was luck. But luck does not feel like this. Luck feels random. This felt curated. It felt calculated. It felt like someone was watching me stumble near the edge of a cliff, waiting until my foot slipped, and then reaching out an invisible hand to yank me back, not to save me, but to keep me in the game, to keep me running. The feeling of being watched grew into a physical sensation. At Cedar Line, things got strange. I was up for a promotion to team lead. It came with a $5 an hour raise. My supervisor, a woman who had always praised my work, suddenly called me into her office. She looked uncomfortable. She told me the position had been eliminated. 2 weeks later, my hours were cut. Not fired, just reduced enough to make me desperate again, reduced enough to put me back in the red. It made no sense, unless someone wanted me to stay right here. At the breaking point, one night, about 3 months ago, the paranoia solidified into something real. It was raining again, a soft drizzle that slicked the streets. I was coming home from a late shift at the bar I worked at on weekends. I parked my car and walked toward my building. Across the street, under the amber glow of a street lamp, sat a black SUV. It was idling. The engine purred with a low, expensive rumble. The windows were tinted darker than legal limits allowed. I froze. My keys laced between my fingers, a pathetic self-defense habit. I stared at the car. As I watched, the window rolled down just an inch. I saw nothing inside but shadow. Then, as if the driver realized I had spotted them, the window rolled up, the engine revved, and the car pulled away, disappearing into the night with the efficiency of a predator losing interest. I did not sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the empty street. Was it Alec number? Alec Reynolds did not sit in cars outside cheap apartments in Tampa. Alec Reynolds was probably on a yacht in the Mediterranean. But someone was there. That brings me to this morning. The morning that broke the camel's back. The sun rose hot and oppressive. I woke up to a piece of paper slid under my door. It was an eviction notice. Not a warning this time. A 3-day notice to pay or quit. Mr. Henderson's mercy had apparently expired. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Swift Capital. Final notice. Account forwarded to asset recovery. Immediate payment of $2,000 required by close of business. Asset recovery is a polite way of saying they come and take your car. Or they garnish your wages until you starve. Then the call from the hospital. Mom needed a new procedure to clear a blockage in her dialysis port. They needed a copay deposit of $800 before they would schedule it. She was in pain. I could hear it in her voice when I called her. Though she tried to hide it. "I am fine, baby," she whispered. "Don't worry about the money. Don't worry about the money." I sat on the edge of my mattress. The sheets were damp with sweat. I looked around my room. I owned nothing. The furniture was secondhand. My clothes were threadbare. My bank account balance was $42.16. I had fought for 7 years. I had fought to be independent. I had fought to prove that I was not a charity case. And look where it got me. I was 35 years old. I was broke. My mother was hurting, and I was about to be homeless. I got down on my knees and pulled the shoebox from under the bed. The cardboard was soft with age. I opened the lid. There it was, the red card. It looked exactly the same as the day he threw it in the mud. The chip in the paint was still there. I picked it up. It felt heavy, heavier than a piece of plastic should feel. It felt like defeat. I realized then that dignity is a luxury item. It is something you can afford when your belly is full and your bills are paid, when you are drowning. Dignity is just a rock tied to your ankle. "You win, Alec," I whispered to the empty room. "You win." I put the card in my pocket. I grabbed my purse. I walked out the door, leaving the eviction notice on the floor. I drove to the bank in downtown Tampa, the one with the marble floors and the cold air. I thought I was just going to surrender. I thought I was just going to cash out $10,000, pay off the sharks, pay the rent, help my mom, and then disappear again. I did not know I was walking into a trap that had been set 7 years ago. I did not know that the invisible hand that had been yanking me back from the cliff was about to push me off into something much deeper and darker than poverty. When I handed that card to Tiffany the teller, I thought I was ending a chapter. I was wrong. I was turning the page to the part of the story where the ink is blood. Mr. Vance placed a porcelain cup on the coaster in front of me. Steam curled off the surface of the tea, smelling of bergamot and something floral. But I did not touch it. My hands were folded in my lap, gripping the strap of my peeling handbag as if it were a parachute cord. The VIP room was a masterclass in intimidation disguised as hospitality. The walls were paneled in dark wood that probably cost more than the total rent I had paid in the last decade. The leather chair swallowed me, designed to make the occupant feel comfortable, but to me, it felt like a trap. The air conditioning was humming a low, almost imperceptible note, chilling the sweat on my neck until I was shivering. Mr. Vance sat opposite me. He had stopped sweating, or at least he had wiped it away, replaced by a veneer of frantic efficiency. He was typing on his keyboard again, the rhythmic clacking the only sound in the room. "Mr. Vance," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. "I do not want tea. I do not want to discuss portfolio options. I want to close the account ending in 4491. I want to withdraw the $10,000, and I want to leave." He stopped typing. He looked at me over the rim of his spectacles. His expression was complicated, part pity, part professional confusion, and a lingering edge of fear that I could not quite place. "Ms. Morales," he began, folding his hands on the desk, "I understand that you believe this is a simple debit account. However, the instrument we are dealing with here is a high-yield blind trust with a variable liquidity structure." I stared at him. "Speak English, please." "It means," he said, choosing his words carefully, "that the $10,000 you are referring to was merely the seed capital, the opening deposit. That money was placed into a diversified, aggressive growth portfolio, automatically managed by our private wealth division. But it was not just the interest." He tapped a key. The large monitor on the wall behind him flickered to life. "This account has been receiving scheduled, automated supplemental injections for the last 84 months. They are coded as blind dividends from a holding company called Janus Vanguard." My stomach turned over. "Injections. You mean deposits?" "Yes, Mr. Vance said. "Monthly deposits, escalating in value each year." I stood up. My knees hit the edge of the mahogany desk. "What are you talking about? Alec left me $10,000. He told me that was it. Payment for my youth. He wouldn't send me money every month." "He didn't send it to you, Ms. Morales." "Mr. Vance corrected gently. "He sent it to the account that was legally frozen until your physical appearance here today. You couldn't touch it. He couldn't touch it. It was a one-way valve." I looked at the screen. It was a wall of numbers, graphs, and transaction logs that scrolled down endlessly. "How much?" I asked. The question came out as a croak. "How much is in there right now?" "Mr." Vance cleared his throat. He reached for his mouse and highlighted a figure in the bottom right corner of the spreadsheet. "As of the market close yesterday, and including the accrued compound interest and the final maturity bonus that triggered upon the 7-year mark," he said, looking at the screen rather than me, "the total withdrawable balance is $2,942,815.06. The room spun. I did not feel joy. I did not feel relief. I did not feel the sudden, giddy lightness of a lottery winner. I felt terrified. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. $2.9 million. "That is impossible," I whispered. "That is not real money. Is it dirty? Did he steal it?" My mind raced back to the rumors, the articles I had seen years ago about Alec's company facing audits, the whispers of financial impropriety. Was this it? Was I the mule? Had he parked illicit funds in an account under my name, waiting for 7 years for the statute of limitations to run out on some crime I didn't know about? Was I about to walk out of here with nearly $3 million of laundered money, only to be tackled by the FBI in the parking lot? "The funds are cleared, Mr. Vance said, reading my panic. They are clean. Every deposit was vetted by our compliance department. Taxes have been paid automatically at the source. This is, legally speaking, the cleanest money in this bank. I sank back into the chair. Why, I asked the heir, why would he give me $3 million if he hates me? I cannot speak to the benefactor's intent. Mr. Vance said, I can only speak to the instructions, and that brings us to the procedural matter. He turned back to his computer. His face grew serious again, the nervous tick returning to his jaw. The system flag that alerted us the Year 7 appearance verification, it requires a physical authentication component. It is a dual-key security measure. You provided the first key, which was your presence and your ID. The second key is an item that was placed in our secure vault 7 years ago. An item? I asked. A sealed envelope. Mr. Vance said, according to the intake log, it contains the final authorization code required to release the hold on the funds. Without it, I cannot transfer this money to you. I can see the account, but I cannot move the decimal point. He typed rapidly, his eyes scanning the digital vault inventory. It should be in box 71 alpha, he muttered. Intake date January 20th, 2019, status. He stopped. His fingers hovered over the keys. The silence in the room stretched, thin and tight as a wire. What? I asked. Status what? Mr. Vance frowned. He clicked the mouse. He clicked it again. Harder. This makes no sense. The log shows that the item was removed. Removed? I asked. By whom? I haven't been here. No, Mr. Vance said slowly. Not by you. The chain of custody log says it was requisitioned for compliance review 3 months ago by an internal auditor. So where is it? It should have been returned. Mr. Vance said, his voice rising in pitch. He looked truly rattled now. It is marked as in transit within the branch, but nothing stays in transit for 3 months. That is a serious violation of protocol. Just then, there was a soft knock at the door. We both jumped. The door opened and Tiffany, the teller from the front, slipped inside. She was holding a plastic bottle of water and a stack of forms on a clipboard. Her demeanor had undergone a complete transformation. Gone was the disdainful girl who judged my handbag. Gone was the terrified employee who had whispered a warning. Now, she looked helpful, aggressively helpful. Her eyes were wide and bright, but there was a tightness around her mouth that didn't match the smile. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice sugary sweet. I brought the account closure forms you asked for, and some water for the guest. She placed the water in front of me. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on Mr. Vance. Tiffany, not now. Mr. Vance said, waving a hand. I am trying to locate the containment envelope for the Reynolds Trust. The system says it is out of the vault. Oh, Tiffany said. She didn't sound surprised. I think I saw a note about that. Didn't Regional Audit take a batch of dormant files last quarter? Maybe it got swept up in that. Regional doesn't take physical keys. Mr. Vance snapped. That is against policy. Well, maybe you should check the archive room in the back, Tiffany suggested. She took a step closer to the desk, effectively blocking my view of the monitor. I can help Ms. Morales fill out the preliminary identity verification while you look. We don't want to keep her waiting, right? She has been waiting 7 years. She said the last 2 words with a strange emphasis. 7 years. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her hands were gripping the clipboard so hard her knuckles were white. There was a sheen of sweat on her upper lip. She was terrified, but she was acting. She was trying to get Mr. Vance out of the room. Mr. Vance sighed. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. You are right. I have to find that envelope. If it is not in the file, we have a major compliance breach. He looked at me. Ms. Morales, please excuse me for a moment. Tiffany will assist you with the standard Patriot Act disclosures. I will be right back. He hurried out of the room, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. The moment he was gone, The smile dropped off Tiffany's face like a stone. She turned to me. Her eyes were dark and urgent. "You need to listen to me," she whispered, leaning over the desk. "Do not sign anything. Do not let him transfer that money." "Why?" I demanded, keeping my voice low. "You told me someone is waiting. Who is waiting? Is it Alec?" "I don't know who they are," Tiffany said, her voice trembling. "But I know what they look for. I work in the back office sometimes. I have seen the flags on this account. It is not just a trust fund. Lady, it is a tripwire." "A tripwire for what?" "For you," she hissed. "For your location. For your signature. The envelope isn't missing. It was taken. Someone took it because they knew you would come today. They wanted to force a manual override." "What does that mean?" "It means if Vance can't find the envelope, he has to call a special number to get a verbal override code. And the moment he makes that call, the person on the other end knows exactly where you are." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Why are you telling me this?" Tiffany looked at the door, then back at me. "Because my sister was in debt," she said, the words rushing out. "She got involved with these people, the ones who buy debt, the ones who track people. I saw the name on your account and I recognized the routing number. It is the same routing number on the checks that never mind." She stopped, realizing she had said too much. "Just don't take the money here. If you take the money, you validate the debt. You validate the contract." "What contract?" I asked. "I divorced him. There is no contract." "There is always a contract," she said grimly. Before I could ask another question, my phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. It was a harsh, vibrating sound against the wood. I looked down. The screen lit up. It was not the landlord. It was not the loan shark. It was a number I did not recognize. No area code, just a string of digits that looked like a routed server address. I picked it up. My thumb hovered over the screen. Tiffany stopped breathing. I opened the message. There were 6 words. "Don't cash it out. Not yet." I stared at the text. The timestamp was literally 2 seconds ago. Whoever sent this was watching. Were they in the bank? Were they watching through the security cameras? I looked up at the corner of the ceiling. A black dome camera stared back at me, its unblinking red eye glowing softly. "Who is it?" Tiffany whispered. I didn't answer. I gripped the phone. "Not yet," I murmured to myself. The text implied that I should cash it out eventually. Just not now. Not here. Not while Mr. Vance was running around looking for a missing envelope. Not while Tiffany was shaking in her heels. "They know I am here," I said. "They have known you were here since you swiped the card," Tiffany said. "The system is faster than you think." Suddenly, the door handle turned. Tiffany jumped back from the desk, smoothing her skirt, plastering the fake smile back onto her face. "Mr. Vance walked in. He looked pale. He was empty-handed. "I cannot find the envelope," he stammered. He looked at me, and I saw genuine fear in his eyes now. "Ms. Morales, I am afraid I have to initiate the secondary protocol. I have to call the trustee directly for a verbal release." He reached for the phone on his desk. "No," I said. "Mr. Vance froze. "Excuse me?" I stood up. I grabbed my peeling bag. I grabbed the red debit card from the desk where he had left it. "I said no," I repeated. My voice was strong. "I have changed my mind. I do not want to withdraw the money today." "Ms. Morales?" Mr. Vance said, his hand hovering over the receiver. "You don't understand. The process has started. The funds are staged. You can't just walk away from $3 million. "Watch me," I said. "If you leave." "Mr. Vance said, his voice dropping to a warning tone. "The account locks for another cycle. You might not be able to access it for well. I don't know how long." "Good," I said. "Let it lock." I looked at Tiffany. She gave me the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. I turned and walked toward the door. "Ms. Morales," Mr. Vance called out, "you are making a mistake. There are people who are expecting this transaction to clear." I stopped at the door. I looked back at him. Tell them, I said, that Skyla Morales doesn't take charity, not even $3 million worth. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the lobby. I expected alarms. I expected security guards to tackle me. But there was only the silence of the bank, the hum of the air conditioner, and the feeling of 1,000 invisible eyes burning into my back. I had 24 hours before I was homeless. I had a mother dying by degrees. I had just walked away from a fortune. But as I pushed through the glass doors and out into the blinding Florida heat, I realized something. I wasn't walking away from the money. I was walking toward the person who sent that text. I was walking toward the truth. The heat hit me the moment the automatic doors of the bank slid shut behind me. It was not just the Florida sun. It was the suffocating, humid blanket of downtown Tampa at noon. My car was parked 3 blocks away, but I did not go to it immediately. I stood in the shadow of an office building, my back pressed against the warm concrete, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I had just walked away from $2.9 million. The number felt heavy in my brain, physically displacing other thoughts. 2.9 million. It was enough to buy a new kidney for my mother. It was enough to buy the apartment building that was evicting me. It was enough to disappear. But the text message burned in my pocket. Don't cash it out. Not yet. I pulled my phone out. The screen was smeared with sweat and makeup. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I unlocked the screen and went to the keypad. My fingers hovered over the digits. I had deleted Alex's number 7 years ago, but the muscle memory of 5 years of marriage does not vanish. My thumb knew the pattern. I typed it in. Area code 727-555-0199. I pressed call. I expected it to ring. I expected a voicemail. I expected, perhaps foolishly, to hear his voice, cool and detached, asking what I wanted. Instead, 3 harsh tones blared in my ear, followed by a robotic female voice. The number you have reached is no longer in service. Please check the number and try your call again. I hung up and dialed again. Maybe I had mistyped. The number you have reached. Dead. I leaned against the wall, shielding my screen from the glare. If Alec had set up a trust fund that activated today, he had to exist somewhere. You do not just orchestrate a multi-million-dollar payout from the void. I opened the browser on my phone. My data plan was throttled because I was late on the bill. So the page loaded with agonizing slowness. I typed, Alec Reynolds Tampa, into the search bar. 7 years ago. Alec Reynolds was a name that opened doors. He was a rising star in private equity, the kind of man whose picture appeared in the business section of the Tampa Bay Times shaking hands with the mayor. He was everywhere. The search results populated. Nothing. I scrolled down. There were a few LinkedIn profiles for other Alec Reynolds, a dentist in Ohio, a college student in London, a mechanic in Texas, but the Alec Reynolds who wore Italian suits and drove a Porsche gone. I refined the search. Reynolds Financial Group, St. Petersburg. A single result appeared near the bottom of the first page. It was a cached link to a business directory that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Obama administration. I clicked it. Reynolds Financial Group. Status dissolved. Dissolution date. January 21st, 2019. The day after the divorce. The day after he threw the card in the mud. I went deeper. I was a millennial. I knew how to dig. I checked the state's corporate registry. I checked archived news sites. It was as if someone had taken a digital eraser to his life. There were no photos, no social media footprints, no current address. Then, on the 3rd page of search results, buried in a PDF archive of a legal trade journal, I found a fragment. It was a headline. Cut off halfway insider whistleblower allegations, rock local firm. Reynolds cites. Personal reasons for sudden departure amid federal. I tried to open the full article, but it was behind a paywall for a defunct publication. Federal. What federal investigation, federal indictment? I stared at the screen. Alec hadn't just left me. He had dismantled his entire existence. He had burned his life to the ground the moment he cut me loose. I needed a human connection, A digital ghost I could not interrogate. But a person I could. I racked my brain. Who was left? I had cut everyone off. I had burned every bridge to prove I didn't need his world. But there was one person who had been more than just Alec's friend. He had been his shadow, his fixer, his attorney, Mason Trent. I didn't have Mason's number. But lawyers are different from financiers. Lawyers need to be found. I searched Mason Trent Attorney Florida. His website popped up immediately. It was not the sleek, high-end firm website I remembered. It was a single landing page for a solo practice in Clearwater. Criminal defense, asset forfeiture, 24-hour consultation. I tapped the number. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when the line clicked open. "Trent," a voice barked. It was him, but it sounded wrong. The Mason I remembered had a voice like velvet smooth. Confident, polished. This voice sounded like gravel in a blender. It sounded tired. "Mason," I said. "It is Skyla." Silence. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. I could hear breathing on the other end, heavy and ragged, like someone who had just run up a flight of stairs. "Skyla," he said finally. He didn't say it like a greeting. He said it like an accusation. You are calling me." "I need to know where Alec is," I said. "I am at the bank. I just found the account." "You are at the bank." Mason's voice spiked. It wasn't anger. It was panic. "Which bank?" "The downtown branch." "Yes. They told me there is money. A lot of money. $2.9 million. "You didn't take it," Mason said. It wasn't a question. It was a desperate hope. "No." I walked out. "Mason, what is going on? Why is there a timer on the account? Why is Alec gone from the internet?" Mason let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You disappeared for 7 years. Skyla, 7 years of radio silence. I thought you were dead, or smart, and now you show up exactly on the day they reopen the file." "Who is they?" I demanded. "And what file?" "Get off this line," Mason snapped. "We cannot talk on a cell network. They sweep the towers near the bank." "Mason, you are scaring me." "You should be scared," he hissed. "You have no idea what you just walked into. That account wasn't a gift. It was a beacon." "A beacon for who?" "Meet me," he said. "Do not go to your apartment. Do not go to your job. Do not pass go. Do you remember the diner on Route 60? The Greek place with the blue roof?" "The Olympian?" I asked. "We used to go there after late nights at the office, back when life was normal." 45 minutes, Mason said. "Come alone. And Skyla, check your rearview mirror." "Why?" "If you see a black SUV, Mason said, his voice dropping to a whisper, do not stop. Do not pull over. Just drive." The line went dead. I stood there in the heat, the phone slippery in my hand. "Check your rearview mirror." I walked to my car. It was parked in a surface lot 3 blocks away. My legs felt heavy, as if the gravity around me had increased. I got into my Toyota, the seat burning the backs of my thighs through my thin slacks. I threw my bag on the passenger seat. I started the engine. The air conditioning blew hot air for a minute, smelling of dust and mold. I pulled out of the lot, turning right onto Kennedy Boulevard. I looked in the mirror. Traffic was heavy. A delivery truck, a red convertible, a family van. I let out a breath. Mason was paranoid. He sounded like he had cracked. Maybe the scandal that took Alec down had taken him down too. Maybe I was taking advice from a man who had lost his mind. I merged onto the highway, heading toward the bridge to Clearwater. The water of the bay glittered to my left, deceptively peaceful. I checked the mirror again. The red convertible had turned off. The truck was gone, but 3 cars back, in the center lane, was a black Chevrolet Suburban. It was nondescript, clean, tinted windows, the kind of car that government agencies and high-end private security firms buy in bulk because they are invisible in America. I changed lanes. I moved to the left, speeding up to 70 miles per hour. The black SUV changed lanes. It did not speed up aggressively. It just matched my pace. keeping exactly 3 car lengths behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I thought about the night outside my apartment, the idling engine, the window that rolled down and then up. They hadn't just found me today. They had been there, watching, waiting. "Why didn't you take me then?" I whispered to the reflection in the glass. "Why wait?" "Because of the date. Year 7. Mr. Vance had said it. Release upon beneficiary's appearance. They needed me to go to the bank. They needed me to trigger the account. Until I swiped that card. The money was locked. And whatever was buried in that transaction log was inaccessible. I wasn't just a beneficiary. I was a key. And now that I had turned the lock but refused to open the door, they were not going to let me out of their sight. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to slam on the brakes. I wanted to scream, but I kept driving. I drove with the precision of a woman who knows that one mistake means disaster. I crossed the Courtney Campbell Causeway, the water stretching out on both sides like a blue desert. The SUV stayed with me, mile after mile. It was not trying to run me off the road, it was hurting me. When I reached Clearwater, I took a sudden turn onto a side street, cutting through a residential neighborhood. I wove through the subdivisions, taking random lefts and rights. I checked the mirror. Empty. I let out a sob of relief. I had lost them. I drove toward the diner, taking the long way, circling the block twice before pulling into the cracked asphalt parking lot of the Olympian. It looked exactly as I remembered it, faded blue roof, neon sign buzzing with a dead letter O, the smell of frying grease hanging in the air. I parked my car in the back, behind a dumpster, trying to hide it from the main road. I checked my phone. It was 1 o'clock. Mason had said 45 minutes. I was 5 minutes early. I walked around to the front entrance. The diner was busy with the lunch rush construction workers, retirees, tired parents. The noise of clattering silverware and low conversation washed over me. I scanned the booths. I saw him. Mason Trent was sitting in the back corner booth, the one farthest from the door. He looked terrible. He was wearing a rumpled suit jacket over a t-shirt. His hair, once perfectly styled, was thinning and gray. He was staring at a cup of black coffee as if it contained the secrets of the universe. I started to walk toward him, but then I froze. My eyes swept past the counter, past the pie display case. Standing by the cash register, waiting for a takeout order, was a woman. She was wearing a beige trench coat, belted tight at the waist. She had sunglasses perched on her head. It was Tiffany, the teller, the girl who had whispered in my ear at the bank less than an hour ago, the girl who had warned me not to take the money. She was not looking at the menu. She was looking at the door. She was looking at me, and she was not smiling. She held a phone to her ear. As our eyes locked, I saw her lips move. She wasn't ordering lunch. "Target acquired," she mouthed. My blood ran cold. Mason had told me to come here. Had he sold me out? Or was Tiffany following me too? I looked back at Mason. He hadn't seen me yet. He was looking at his watch, tapping his foot nervously. I looked back at Tiffany. She took a step toward me, dropping the pretense of the takeout order. Her hand went into her coat pocket. I was trapped. Behind me was the parking lot where a black SUV might be waiting. In front of me was a man I wasn't sure I could trust. And between us was a bank teller who was clearly not just a bank teller. I made a split-second decision. I didn't run. I walked straight past Tiffany, ignoring her as she stepped into my path. "Ms. Morales," she said, her voice low and hard. "We need to talk." "Get away from me," I hissed. Not breaking stride, I reached the booth and slid in opposite Mason. He looked up, startled. His eyes were bloodshot. "Skyla," he breathed. He reached out as if to touch my hand, then pulled back. "You made it. Were you followed?" "Yes," I said. "By a black SUV, and by her." I pointed a trembling finger toward the front of the diner. Mason turned his head. He looked at Tiffany, who was now standing in the middle of the aisle, staring at us. Mason's face went white. He didn't look confused. He looked recognized. "Damn it," Mason whispered. That is not a bank teller. Skyla. Who is she? I demanded. She works for the firm that cleaned up Alec's mess, Mason said. She is the auditor. She told me not to take the money, I said. She warned me. Mason looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a terrifying realization. She didn't warn you to save you, he said. She warned you because if you took the money inside the bank, the jurisdiction belongs to the feds. If you walk out with the access code, but without the cash, the jurisdiction belongs to them. To who? To the people who have been hunting Alec for 7 years, Mason said. And now, because you didn't sign that paper, you are the only loose end left. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of car keys, not for his car, but for something else. We have to go, he said. Now, before the black SUV gets here. Where is Alec? I asked, grabbing his wrist. I am not going anywhere until you tell me where my husband is. Mason looked at the door, where Tiffany was now speaking into her phone again, blocking the exit. Your husband is dead. Skyla, Mason said. I felt the air leave the room. What? Alec Reynolds died in a plane crash off the coast of Belize 6 years ago, Mason said. Or at least, that is what the death certificate says. He looked me dead in the eye. But if he is dead, Mason whispered, then who has been depositing $10,000 into that account every month for the last 7 years? He stood up. Run, he said. Kitchen exit, now. We were parked behind a derelict warehouse in the industrial district, 3 miles from the diner. The rain had started again, drumming a relentless, erratic rhythm on the roof of Mason's beat-up Ford Taurus. The interior smelled of stale tobacco, nervous sweat, and the specific, musty decay of a man who has given up on himself. I sat in the passenger seat, my body vibrating with adrenaline. Mason Trent, the man who used to wear $3,000 suits and drink scotch older than I was, sat gripping the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. He looked like a ruin of his former self. His eyes were sunken into dark hollows, his skin pasty and gray, and his hands, the hands of a surgeon when it came to corporate law, were shaking so badly he could barely get his lighter to work. Talk, I said. My voice was not loud. It was the quiet, dangerous calm of a woman who realizes she is the only person in the room who does not know the rules of the game. You said he is dead. Then you said he is sending money. Which is it? Mason, is he a ghost? Or is he rich? Mason finally got the cigarette lit. He took a drag that seemed to go all the way to his toes, then exhaled a cloud of blue smoke against the windshield. He is legally dead, Mason said, his voice grating like sandpaper. Certificate, coroner's report, closed casket. It happened 6 months after the divorce. A private charter went down in the Caribbean. No survivors. I never heard about it, I said. I would have known. You deleted him. Skyla, Mason said, turning to look at me. You blocked the news. You blocked the mutual friends. You moved to a different zip code and buried your head in the sand. And frankly, the obituary was small. It was designed to be small. So he is dead, I whispered, a strange, hollow grief trying to take root in my chest. No, Mason said sharply. The pilot died. A man named Alec Reynolds died. But the man you married, the man who built that trust fund, he is alive. He is breathing. And he has been living in hell for 7 years so that you could live in that crappy apartment. Don't you dare, I snapped, turning on him. Don't you dare paint him as a martyr. He threw me away. Mason, I was there. I stood in the rain. I saw his face. I saw the way he looked at me like I was garbage. I saw the woman in the car. Mason let out a short, bitter laugh. He tapped ash onto the floor mat of the car. The woman, he muttered. Right, the blonde, the upgrade. She was beautiful, I said, the memory stinging as fresh as if it were yesterday. She was perfect. She was an actress. Skyla, Mason said. The words hung in the air between us, heavier than the smoke. I stared at him. What? Her name was Chloe, She was a waitress from Sarasota who did community theater on the weekends, Mason said, reciting the details with a weary precision. Alec paid her $500 to sit in that car, wear a white blazer, and look at you with pity. She didn't even know his last name. She thought she was filming a scene for a student film. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The world tilted on its axis. The woman, the symbol of my inadequacy, the reason I had spent 7 years hating myself for not being enough. She was a prop. I managed to choke out. Why would he do that? Why would he stage a betrayal? Because he needed you to hate him, Mason said. He looked at me with a brutal intensity. He didn't just need you to leave, Skyla. He needed you to run. He needed you to sever every tie, burn every bridge, and never look back. If he had told you the truth, you would have stayed. You would have tried to stand by him. And if you had stayed, you would be dead. What truth? I demanded. What was so dangerous that he had to destroy my life to save it? Alec didn't just run a hedge fund, Mason said. He was the bagman for a massive infrastructure consortium, bridges, highways, government contracts. He found out they were cooking the books, not just skimming off the top, but laundering cartel money through municipal bonds, billions of dollars. Skyla. When he tried to flag it internally, they threatened to kill you. He took another drag, his eyes distant. They sent him a photo of you sleeping in our bed, Mason whispered. Taken from inside the house. That was the day he came to me. He made a deal with the Department of Justice, total cooperation in exchange for a clean exit. But the exit had to be absolute. He had to become a pariah. He had to liquidate his assets, crash his own company, and vanish. So the $10,000, I started. The $10,000 was the only liquid cash he could give you without triggering an audit, Mason said. But the amount that was the gamble. The gamble. He knew you, Mason said softly. He knew you better than anyone. He sat in my office the night before the divorce, crying like a child, and he told me exactly what to do. He said, Mason, if I give her $1 million now, they will find her. They will torture her for the rest. If I give her nothing, she will starve. I have to give her just enough to be an insult. I felt tears pricking my eyes, hot and angry. He manipulated me. He bet on your pride, Mason corrected. He told me, give her $10,000. Tell her it is payment for her youth. Make it hurt. Make it hurt so bad that she would rather eat glass than spend a dime of it. Because as long as that money sat in the account remained dormant, untraceable, safe. He used my self-respect as a security code, I said, realizing the twisted genius of it. He knew I wouldn't touch it. And you didn't, Mason said. For 7 years, you passed the test, and because the account stayed dormant, the secondary deposits could flow in every month. The whistleblower compensation fund deposited his cut into that blind trust. It compounded. It grew. It waited for the statute of limitations to expire on the original RICO case. Year 7, I whispered. Exactly, Mason said. Today, the day the file seals permanently, the day he can legally transfer the funds to you without the cartel lawyers being able to claw it back. I sat back against the seat, my head pounding. It was too much. The hate I had nursed, the victory of not spending his money. It was all part of his architecture. I hadn't been rebelling against him. I had been following his script. So he is alive, I said. Where is he? I don't know, Mason said. And that is the truth. Part of the deal was that he cut contact with me too. But he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a small, silver key. It was a standard padlock key, indistinguishable from a million others, except for a piece of masking tape wrapped around the head with a number written in Sharpie 404. He placed the key on the dashboard. He sent me this 3 days ago, Mason said. No note, just the key. But I know what it fits. There is a self-storage facility in Plant City, cheap place, the kind where they don't ask for ID. I looked at the key. What is in there? The truth about your independence, Mason said. His voice was heavy with guilt. What does that mean? You think you survived on your own. Skyla, Mason said. He turned to face me fully, and I saw the shame in his eyes. You think you scraped by. You think you got lucky with that landlord who let you slide on rent. You think that police officer who let you go after the accident was just being nice. My blood went cold. How do you know about the accident? I hadn't told anyone about the accident. Because I handled it, Mason said quietly. Alec left a contingency fund, a separate pile of cash, managed by me. He gave me strict instructions. Watch her, do not let her drown. If she gets close to the edge, pull her back. But never let her see the hand that saves her. I felt sick. The landlord paid in cash, Mason said. I dropped the envelope in his mailbox at 3 a.m. The hospital bill. Shell company donation, Mason said. I set it up. My job at Cedarline. I called a favor with a guy I went to law school with, Mason admitted. He got your resume to the top of the pile. I stared at him, horror washing over me. Everything, I whispered. My whole life, my struggle, my victories. It was all him. I was just a puppet, a pet he was keeping alive in a terrarium. You worked hard. Skyla, Mason said, trying to soften the blow. You survived the day-to-day, but the safety net, the miracles, that was Alec. He couldn't be there to hold you, so he paid to make sure the world didn't crush you. I grabbed the door handle. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. I felt violated in a way that was deeper than any physical assault. My pride. The one thing I thought I owned, the one thing I thought I had kept safe from him was a lie. He had bought that too. I hate him, I said, my voice trembling with a rage that was entirely new. I hate him more now than I did yesterday. Before, I thought he was just cruel. Now I know he was playing God. He loves you, Mason said. He gave up his life for you. He didn't give up his life, I spat. He just changed the channel. He turned me into a widow without the courtesy of a body. He watched me suffer. Mason. He watched me eat instant noodles while he had you paying my landlord. He wanted you alive, Mason said firmly. And right now, that is the only thing that matters. Because Tiffany, or whatever her name is, she isn't the only one looking for you. The statute of limitations might be up for the money. But the people Alec testified against, they don't have a statute of limitations on revenge. He pointed to the key on the dashboard. If you want to understand, Mason said, if you want to know what it cost him, go to Plant City, Unit 404. But Skyla, listen to me. Once you open that door, there is no going back to the lie. You can't be the victim anymore. I looked at the key. It sat there, gleaming dully in the gray light. I am not a victim, I said, grabbing the key and shoving it into my pocket. I am a woman who is about to find out exactly how much she is worth. I opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. Where are you going? Mason called out. To find my car, I said, not looking back. And then I am going to Plant City, if he left me a trail. I am going to follow it. And when I find him, I am not going to thank him. I'm going to make him answer for every single time he saved me when I didn't ask. Skyla, Mason yelled. Be careful. The SUV. Let them come, I muttered, walking toward the road. I have almost $3 million and nothing left to lose. The drive to Plant City was a blur of gray highway and green farmland that smelled of fertilizer and wet earth. It is a different world from the coastal wealth of Tampa. Here, the money is in the soil, not the banks, the storage facility. A place called Secure Keep Self-Storage sat at the end of a gravel road that crunched loudly under the tires of my car. Mason pulled up beside me in his Taurus. He didn't say a word as he got out. He just gestured for me to follow him. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick, hanging heavy with the scent of mildew and the chemical tang of pesticide from the nearby strawberry fields. We walked down a long, corrugated metal corridor. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like trapped flies, flickering in a way that made the shadows jump. Unit 404, Mason said, his voice echoing in the narrow space. He didn't reach for the lock. He stood back, his hands in his pockets, looking like a man attending a funeral he didn't want to be at. He nodded at the door. I pulled the key from my pocket. My hand was trembling, not from fear, but from a strange, vibrating frequency of anger. I slid the silver key into the padlock. It turned with a heavy, satisfying click. I pulled the lock free and grabbed the handle of the roll-up door. With a screech of rusted metal on metal, I shoved it upward. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of old furniture or dust. It was the smell of rubbing alcohol, stale coffee, and the distinct sour odor of a human being living in a space designed for cardboard boxes. I stepped inside and pulled the string for the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The light flared on, illuminating a 10 by 10 concrete box. I stood there, paralyzed. I had expected stacks of cash. I had expected files. I had expected, perhaps, a secret luxury hideaway with a leather sofa and a humidor. Instead, I was looking at a prison cell. In the corner sat a narrow iron cot, the kind you buy at an army surplus store. The mattress was thin and stained. A sleeping bag was rolled up tightly at the foot. Beside it was a folding plastic table, white but scarred with cigarette burns. A single plastic chair with a cracked leg sat facing the wall. "This," I started, but my voice failed. "He lived here. Off and on," Mason said from the doorway. He didn't come in. It was as if he couldn't bear to step into the ghost of his friend's misery. When the heat was too high to stay in the motels, when he needed to be invisible. I walked to the table. There was a hot plate in the corner. A stack of instant noodle cups, the same brand I had eaten for 3 years because they were 3 for $1. A box of generic tea bags. My chest tightened. This was Alec Reynolds, the man who used to complain if the thread count on our sheets was below 600. The man who had a standing reservation at the most expensive steakhouse in St. Petersburg. He had lived like a rat in a cage. On the wall above the table, there was no art. There were maps. They were taped directly to the concrete. Topographic maps of the Tri-County area, detailed street maps of Tampa, and on them, routes were highlighted in different colors: red for danger, blue for safe, green for I leaned closer. The green line traced a path from my old apartment on 4th Street to my job at the data entry firm. Another green line traced the route to the dialysis center where my mother went 3 times a week. He hadn't been plotting an escape. He had been plotting my commute. "He watched," I whispered. "He really watched." "He had to," Mason said. "He had to know where the threats were." I looked at a piece of paper taped next to the map. It was a list, handwritten in Alec's sharp, angular script. The header read, "Do not contact." My name was at the top, Skyla. Underlined 3 times, then Mason, then Mom, then a list of numbers I didn't recognize. Next to the cot, there was a stack of banker's boxes. They were labeled with dates. I knelt down. The dust on the floor ruined the knees of my slacks, but I didn't care. I pulled the lid off the box marked 2023. Inside, there were no clothes. There were receipts, bank transfer confirmations, and photographs. I picked up the first photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It was me. I was standing at a bus stop in the rain, looking miserable. I flipped it over. On the back, Alec had written October 12th. "She looks thin. Send the grocery voucher." I felt a wave of nausea. I remembered that month. I had received a $50 gift card in the mail for a local grocery store, allegedly part of a customer appreciation promotion. I had cried with relief. I had bought chicken and fresh vegetables. I thought the universe had given me a break. It wasn't the universe. It was the man who had abandoned me. I dug deeper into the box. I found a file folder labeled "A Medical Intervention." I opened it. Inside was a copy of my mother's hospital bill from 2 years ago. The one for the emergency catheter surgery. It was $17,000. We had no money. Then, the social worker had come in, smiling, telling us that a Suncoast Community Health Grant had covered the balance. I found the wire transfer receipt. The money hadn't come from a community grant. It had come from a shell company called Blue Heron Holdings, routed through a bank in the Cayman Islands. "He paid for the surgery," I said, my voice shaking. "He paid for everything. He couldn't let her die." "Skyla," Mason said softly, "he knew that if your mother died, you would break, and he couldn't be there to hold you together." I threw the file on the floor. "So he bought my stability. He let me think I was solving these problems. He let me feel proud that I negotiated that bill." "Would you have taken the money if he handed it to you?" Mason asked. "No," I screamed. "But that is not the point. He stole my reality. Mason, he made me an actor in a play I didn't know I was in." I grabbed another file. "Cedarline dispute." I froze. Last year, I had been sexually harassed by a middle manager at Cedarline. I had filed a complaint. HR had stonewalled me. Then, suddenly, the manager was fired, and I was given a settlement of $5,000 to drop the case. I had walked out of that office feeling like a warrior. I had fought the system and won. I opened the file. There was a letter from a high-powered law firm in Miami, a firm that charged $800 an hour. It was addressed to the CEO of Cedarline Risk Review. It threatened a class-action lawsuit and a public media expose if the matter regarding Skyla Morales was not resolved favorably and immediately. The bill for the legal services was $12,000. Alec had paid $12,000 to get me a $5,000 settlement. I dropped the paper. My hands were numb. My victory. My warrior moment. It was bought. It was paid for. I hadn't defeated that manager. Alec had reached out from the grave and crushed him like a bug. "I have nothing," I whispered, sitting back on my heels on the dirty concrete floor. "I have no victories. I have no survival story. I am just a charity case who didn't know she was on the payroll." The shame was hotter than the anger. It burned in my throat. All those nights I had looked in the mirror and told myself, "You are doing it. Skyla, you are making it on your own. Lies. All of it." "You have your life," Mason said, stepping into the room. He looked down at me, his expression pained. "And you have your safety." That is what he bought. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black notebook. It was a moleskin. Worn at the edges, the elastic band stretched out. "He told me to give you this," Mason said, "but only if we ended up here." I took the notebook. It felt heavy, like it contained more than just paper. I opened it. It wasn't a diary. There were no Dear Diary entries about how much he missed me. It was a manual, a cold, hard operational manual. Protocol for the Protection of SAM, page 1. Surveillance distances, how to track without being seen. Page 2. Financial intervention triggers, when to inject cash, when to let her struggle so she doesn't get suspicious. I flipped through the pages. It was clinical. It was terrifying. He had analyzed my psychological breaking points. If she cries in public, monitor for 24 hours. If she sells jewelry, inject funds via utility overpayment. Then I got to the last written page. The ink was different here, darker. The handwriting was more hurried, less precise. Contingency Year 7, underneath, in bold. Block letters. If she comes to the bank in Year 7, initiate Phase 2. Note to enforcer. If Skyla attempts to withdraw the funds, she has been compromised or she is desperate. If she is desperate, she is vulnerable. If she is vulnerable, they will find her. Phase 2 is no longer about protection. It is about weaponization. "What is Phase 2? I asked, looking up at Mason. "You are holding it," Mason said. He pointed to the bottom of the box I had been digging through. I looked down. Under the files, under the receipts, there was a small, silver USB drive taped to the cardboard bottom. Next to it was a thick cream-colored envelope. The envelope had my name on it. For Skyla. And underneath, written in a shaky hand that I recognized as the one he used when he had been drinking or crying, "Why, when you are ready to hate me for the right reasons." I peeled the tape off and took the USB drive. It felt cold in my palm. "What is on this?" I asked. "Leverage," Mason said. That drive contains the unredacted files that Alex stole from the consortium 7 years ago. The files he didn't give to the DOJ, the insurance policy, and the envelope, the instructions on how to use it, Mason said, and the explanation of why he has to die. I held the envelope. My thumb traced the letters of my name. I felt a sudden, violent urge to tear it open, to scream at the paper, to demand an apology from a man who wasn't there, but the silence of the storage unit held me down. The hum of the fluorescent light was the only sound. He didn't just leave me money, I realized, the horror dawning on me. He left me a war. He left you a choice, Mason corrected. You can walk away. Skyla, you can burn that drive. You can forget the money. You can go back to your apartment and wait for the eviction. Or you can finish what he started, Mason said. But if you open that envelope, you are not the victim anymore. You become an accomplice. I looked at the receipts on the floor. The proof of my hollow independence. The evidence that I had been a child playing house while the adults kept the wolves away. I was done being a child. I picked up the envelope. I slid a finger under the seal. I am done with the right reasons, I said, my voice hard and flat in the damp air. I just want the truth. I ripped the envelope open. Mason reached into the bottom of the cardboard box, pushing aside the yellowed receipts and the surveillance logs that mapped my life. He pulled out a laptop. It was not a sleek, modern machine. It was a thick black Panasonic Toughbook, the kind used by police departments and military contractors. It looked like a brick, scarred and heavy, designed to survive a war zone. He placed it on the plastic table, right next to the hot plate and the stack of instant noodles. He didn't ask if I was ready. He knew I wasn't. There is no way to be ready to hear the voice of a ghost. He plugged a power cord into a strip that dangled from the ceiling light. The machine hummed to life with the loud whir of a cooling fan. Mason typed in a password, a long string of characters that he seemed to have memorized, and then he stepped back. There is only one file on the desktop, Mason said, his voice low. I have never watched it. He told me that if I watched it, I would be liable. Plausible deniability is the only reason I still have a law license. Skyla, so this is for you. He walked to the roll-up door and turned his back to me, lighting another cigarette, staring out into the gray mist of the storage facility corridor. He was giving me privacy, or perhaps he was just afraid of the man on the screen. I sat on the cracked plastic chair. My heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a trapped bird trying to break the cage. I reached out and touched the trackpad. The cursor moved to the center of the screen, hovering over a video file simply named final_instruction.mp4. I clicked. The screen went black for a second, and then a grainy, slightly pixelated image resolved. It was Alec. The breath left my lungs in a sharp, painful gasp. It wasn't the Alec I remembered from our wedding day, standing tall in a tuxedo. It wasn't the cold, steel-eyed monster who had stood in the rain 7 years ago. This was a man who looked like he had been hunted. He was sitting on the edge of a bed in what looked like a cheap motel room. The walls were painted a sickly shade of beige. A lamp with a stained shade cast a yellow, jaundiced light over his face. He was wearing a plain gray t-shirt that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost weight. His cheekbones were sharp, cutting against skin that looked too pale. There were dark circles under his eyes, deep bruises of exhaustion that spoke of sleepless nights and constant fear. He looked at the camera. He adjusted the angle slightly. His hand coming into the frame, I saw that he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. The tan line where it used to be was still visible. "Hello, Sky?" he said. His voice, it washed over me like physical contact. It was raspier than I remembered, deeper, stripped of the confident cadence of the boardroom. It was the voice of a man who had forgotten how to speak to anyone but himself. I gripped the edge of the table. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away furiously. I needed to see this. I needed to see every pixel. "If you are watching this," Alex said, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. Then it is year 7. You are alive. You are angry, and you are probably sitting in a storage unit in Plant City that smells like rat poison. He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. I am sorry about the smell, he said. It was the only place I could pay for in cash 5 years in advance without raising a flag. His expression sobered instantly. The ghost of a smile vanished, replaced by a desperate intensity. I know you hate me, he said. I know you have spent 2,555 days cursing my name. I know you burned the photos. I know you deleted the friends. And Skyla, I need you to know that I designed that hate. I built it, brick by brick, because I knew that hate is a more efficient fuel for survival than grief. I shook my head at the screen. You bastard, I whispered. If I had left you with a tearful goodbye. Alec continued, as if answering me. If I had told you I loved you but I had to go, you would have waited for me. You would have looked for me. You would have kept the house. You would have kept the routine. And if you had done that, the people I stole from would have found you within a week. They would have used you to get to me, and when they were done with you. He looked away from the camera for a moment. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I couldn't let that happen. I had to make you radioactive. I had to make you run. I had to sever the limb to save the body. He took a breath and looked back at the lens. Let's talk about the money. $10,000. He held up a hand. I know. It was an insult. It was a slap in the face. Payment for your youth. God. Saying those words to you in the rain was the hardest thing I've ever done. I wanted to vomit. He leaned closer to the camera. But here is the truth. Sky, if I had given you $1 million, you would have been suspicious. You would have thought it was dirty money. You might have tried to return it, or go to the police. If I had given you nothing, you would have starved. I know your pride, but I also know the economy. You would have broken. So, he continued, I had to find the number that sat right in the uncanny valley of your psychology. $10,000. Small enough to be legal, large enough to be useful, but delivered with enough cruelty that you would rather die than spend it. I needed you to put that card in a box and ignore it, because as long as you ignored it, the account stayed dark. It stayed off the radar. And while it sat there, the interest compounded, and the blind deposits from my settlement agreement poured in. I looked at the red debit card sitting on the table next to the laptop. He was right. He had played me like a chessboard. He had weaponized my own self-respect to turn me into a safe deposit box. I am not going to pretend I was noble, Alex said, his voice hardening. I controlled you. I manipulated your life from the shadows. I paid your landlord. I fixed your car insurance issues. I bribed your boss. I took away your agency because I didn't trust the world to be kind to you. He rubbed his face with his hands. I watched you, Sky, through cameras, through reports. I saw you crying at the bus stop. I saw you eating those damn noodles every time you suffered. I wanted to break cover. I wanted to send a check. I wanted to fly back and hold you. But I couldn't, because the year 7 clock was ticking. Year 7, I whispered. Why 7? 7 years is the magic number, Alex said, answering the question I had asked the empty room. It is the statute of repose for the specific financial crimes the consortium committed. It is the expiration date on the non-prosecution agreement I signed. And most importantly, it is the timeline for the blind trust to mature into an irrevocable asset. Before today, if you had touched that money, the cartel lawyers could have frozen it. They could have claimed it was proceeds of crime. But today, after 7 years, it is clean. It is yours. It is untouchable. He leaned back, the bed springs squeaking in the cheap motel room. But here is the catch. Here is why I am recording this in a room that costs $40 a night instead of sending you a letter. He looked at the camera with a gaze that chilled me to the bone. I wasn't the only one watching you. My blood ran cold. I thought of the black SUV. I thought of Tiffany. The people I testified against, they didn't go to jail. Not all of them. The system is broken. Sky, you know that. Some of them made deals. Some of them just paid fines. And they have been waiting. They knew I moved money. They knew I hid a massive chunk of the capital before I turned informant. They have been looking for it for 7 years. They couldn't find me, Alex said. I am good at disappearing. But they knew I had a wife. And they knew I was sentimental. Even if I pretended not to be. They gambled that I left the money with you. They have been watching your accounts. They have been monitoring your credit report. They have been waiting for a spike, a withdrawal, a deposit, anything that signaled the cash was moving. That is why you couldn't spend the 10,000, Alex said, his voice urgent now. If you had used that card at a grocery store in year 3, a flag would have gone up in a server farm in Zurich, and within 12 hours, men who do not ask questions would have been at your door. He pointed a finger at the lens. If you are watching this, it means you went to the bank. It means you triggered the year 7 appearance. It means you swiped the card. I did, I whispered. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Alex said. It was time, but listen to me carefully. The moment you swipe that card, the beacon lit up. They know where the money is now, and they know where you are. This brings us to phase 2. He reached down beside the bed and picked up a thick manila envelope. It looked exactly like the one I had just opened. Phase 2 isn't about hiding anymore. You can't hide. You are on the board now. Phase 2 is about offense. In the box, under this laptop, is a USB drive. That drive contains the leverage. It has the original ledgers, the names of the judges they bribed, the offshore accounts they used to launder the infrastructure bonds. It is the nuclear option. I didn't give it to the feds because I needed an insurance policy. I needed something to trade if they ever found me. But I am giving it to you, Alex said, because if you have the money, you need the gun to protect it. I don't want a gun, I sobbed. I just want my life back. You can't have your old life back, Alex said, his voice soft but unyielding. That life is gone, but you can build a new one. A powerful one. You have nearly $3 million, Sky, and you have the truth. You can use that drive to bury them. You can use the money to hire the best security, the best lawyers. You can become untouchable. He paused. He looked down at his hands again. I know about your mom, he said quietly. The mention of my mother made me freeze. I know her kidneys are failing. I know about the dialysis. I know you are terrified of losing her. He looked up, and his eyes were wet. I couldn't let her die. Sky, I couldn't let your mother die because of bills while these people were eating steak dinners on the money they stole from the public pension funds. That is why I set up the Blue Heron Fund. That is why I intervened. I know you wanted to do it yourself. I honor that. But please forgive me for saving her. He took a deep breath. I am out of time. I have to move. I can't stay in one place for more than 2 days. He leaned in until his face filled the screen. I am not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I broke your heart to save your life, and I would do it again. I would do it 1,000 times. But if you want revenge, Skyla, if you want to burn someone down for the hell you have lived in for 7 years, burn the right people. Don't burn me. Burn the system that made this necessary. He reached for the camera to turn it off. Then he stopped. His hand hovered near the lens. One last thing, he said. His voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the fan. If you are watching this video, it means you got the key from Mason. It means you went to the storage unit. He looked terrified. If you are watching this, it means they have found you. The bank isn't safe. The VIP room isn't safe. The teller line isn't safe. Do not trust the bank. Skyla, the bank is owned by the same holding company that laundered the bonds. The moment you walked in there, you didn't just open an account. You walked into the slaughterhouse. The screen went black. The video ended. I sat there in the silence of the storage unit. The hum of the Tough Book fan sounded like a scream in the quiet. The bank is owned by the holding company. I thought of Mr. Vance. I thought of his sweating forehead. I thought of his delay tactics. I cannot find the envelope. I have to call the trustee. He hadn't been looking for an envelope. He had been stalling. He had been keeping me in the room. And Tiffany, don't cash it out. Not yet. She wasn't saving me from the debt collectors. She wasn't saving me from the government. She was saving me from the bank itself. Mason, I said, my voice shaking. Mason turned from the door. He threw his cigarette onto the concrete floor and crushed it with his heel. You saw it, he asked. The bank, I said, standing up. Mr. Vance. He works for them. Mason nodded grimly. Why do you think I told you to run that Year 7 alert didn't just ping the central server? It pinged a private server in the Cayman Islands. Vance was probably typing a message to a hit team while he was offering you tea. I looked at the USB drive in my hand. It wasn't just data, it was a kill switch. So what do we do? I asked. If they know I was at the bank, and they know I didn't take the money, they know I am running. We initiate phase 2, Mason said. Like he said. I don't know how to be a weapon, Mason, I said. I am a claims adjuster. I wait tables. Mason looked at me. He looked at the peeling handbag on the table. He looked at the red debit card. You survived 7 years of poverty because you were too proud to take a handout, Mason said. You have more grit than any man I know. Alec didn't leave this to you because he loved you. Skyla. He left it to you because he knew you were the only one angry enough to use it. He walked over and closed the laptop. Now, Mason said, grab the drive, grab the card. We have to go. Because if Vance made that call, the black SUV isn't the only thing coming to Plant City. I grabbed the silver drive and squeezed it in my fist until it hurt. I grabbed the red card. Let's go, I said. I have a withdrawal to make, but not from the bank. I did not run. That was what the old Skyla would have done. The old Skyla. The one who counted pennies for instant noodles and taped her shoes with duct tape, would have taken the silver drive and the red card and fled to a Motel 6 in Georgia. But I was not her anymore. The video in the storage unit had burned that version of me to ash. Alec had left me a weapon. I was going to learn how to fire it. I sat in the passenger seat of Mason's car, the rain drumming a slow rhythm on the roof. I looked at the red debit card in my hand. It was no longer a symbol of humiliation. It was a key to a war chest. Drive me to a hotel, I told Mason. Not a cheap one. Take me to the Vinoy. And then, I need you to make a call. Who is the most aggressive, terrifying corporate litigator in Florida, the one the cartels are afraid of? Mason looked at me, a flicker of surprise piercing his exhaustion. Elias Thorne, but he costs $800 an hour, and he doesn't take walk-ins. He will take me, I said, holding up the USB drive, because I am about to hand him the biggest RICO case of the century. We did not withdraw the cash. Cash is heavy. Cash is dangerous. Cash gets you killed in a parking lot. Instead, from the safety of a suite at the Vinoy Hotel, using an encrypted connection, I activated the trust, but I did not transfer it to a checking account. I moved it into a blind holding structure, a legal fortress that Mason helped me set up in 10 minutes. I became a corporation. I became a formidable legal entity. Then, I went shopping, not for clothes, but for protection. By 5 o'clock that evening, I had a team. Elias Thorne, a man who wore suits that cost more than my car and had eyes like a shark, sat in my suite reviewing the files on the drive. 2 ex-military private security contractors stood outside my door. A forensic accountant named Sarah was already tracing the shell companies that had been tormenting me. This is incredible, Elias murmured, scrolling through the data Alec had stolen. This connects the bank, the construction firms, and the local government. Skyla, this is a nuclear bomb. I know, I said, but before we drop the bomb, I have some house cleaning to do. I started with the smallest nuisance, Mr. Henderson, my landlord. At 6 o'clock, Mr. Henderson banged on the door of my apartment on 4th Street. He was expecting to find a terrified woman begging for another day. He was expecting to throw my boxes on the curb. Instead, he found a process server. I wasn't there, but the security team live-streamed it to my phone. Mr. Henderson's face when he was handed the packet was a portrait of confusion. It wasn't an eviction response. It was a lawsuit. We hadn't just paid the rent. Sarah, the forensic accountant, had used the data on the drive to cross-reference the ownership of my apartment building. It turned out Mr. Henderson didn't own it. A shell company linked to the cartel did. And Mr. Henderson had been laundering money through maintenance fees and late penalties for a decade. We sued him for housing code violations, illegal surveillance, and racketeering. I watched on my screen as he read the first page, his face turning the color of wet cement. He didn't evict me. He ran to his car. Next was Swift Capital, the loan sharks. I didn't pay them the $2,000. Elias sent a cease and desist letter to their headquarters, attaching a single page from Alex's ledger. It showed that Swift Capital was not a licensed lender but a front for washing drug money. The letter gave them 1 hour to dissolve my debt and remove all negative marks from my credit report, or we would forward the full file to the SEC. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A notification from my credit monitoring app. My score had jumped 100 points. The debt was gone. It was intoxicating. For 7 years, these people had been giants, and I had been an insect. But the moment I turned on the light, I realized they were just cockroaches, and I was the one holding the boot, but the real target was the bank. The next morning, I went back. I did not wear my fraying blazer. I wore a tailored navy suit I had bought the night before. I did not carry a peeling handbag. I carried a leather briefcase, and I did not walk in alone. I walked in flanked by Elias Thorne and one of the security guards. The air in the bank was just as cold as it had been yesterday, but the dynamic had shifted. When I stepped onto the marble floor, the silence was instant. Tiffany was at her window. She looked up. Her eyes went wide. She reached for her silent alarm, but then she saw the man standing next to me. She froze. "Mister?" Vance came running out of his office. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked. "Miss Morales?" he stammered, sweating again. We didn't expect you back. I assume you are here to complete the withdrawal." "I am here for the audit logs," I said. My voice was crisp, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "I beg your pardon." Vance blinked. Elias stepped forward. He placed a document on the counter. It hit the marble with a heavy slap. "We represent the Reynolds Trust," Elias said, his voice smooth and lethal. "We are here to formally request the chain of custody logs for the containment envelope that went missing from your vault, and we want the security footage from yesterday, specifically the camera angles covering the teller line and your office. That is proprietary internal data," Vance sputtered. "You need a warrant." "We don't need a warrant," Elias said, smiling. "We have the original charter of the trust. It grants the beneficiary full audit rights. If you refuse, we will freeze this branch's assets by noon today." Vance looked at me. He looked at Elias. He realized he was outgunned. "I will see what I can pull up," Vance whispered. Retreating to his office, I turned to Tiffany. She was staring at her computer screen, refusing to make eye contact. Her hands were shaking. "Hello, Tiffany?" I said softly. She flinched. "You told me not to cash it out," I said. "You said someone was waiting. You said you were saving me." She didn't answer. "Elias?" I said. "Show her." Elias opened a folder. He pulled out a printout. It was a personnel file, hacked from a third-party server by our team overnight. "Tiffany Ames," I read. "Junior teller, but also a contractor for data point recovery services." Tiffany's head snapped up. Her face was pale. "You aren't a savior," I said, leaning in close to the glass. "You are a spotter. You get paid a commission every time you identify a dormant account that reactivates. You sell that data to debt collectors, to private investigators, to anyone willing to pay for a lead." "I was trying to help," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "I really was. I knew if you took the cash, the system would lock you down. I wanted you to walk away so I could sell the lead later, when you were safe." "You wanted to sell my location," I corrected. "You weren't warning me about a hitman. You were warning me not to ruin your commission. If the feds seize the money, you wouldn't get your cut." She looked down, shame burning her cheeks. "I have debts too, lady. We all have debts." "Not anymore," I said. "I am closing the loop." I turned away from her. I felt no pity. I had spent 7 years pitying the world and myself, and it had gotten me nowhere. "Mr. Vance emerged from his office. He was holding a file. He looked defeated. "Here," he said, handing it to Elias. "The logs. But it won't help you. The envelope was signed out by an external auditor. The name is fake. The ID was fake. It is a dead end." "It is not a dead end," I said. "It is proof." I looked at Vance. "Proof that you let them in," I said. "You let the consortium into your vault. You compromised a federal witness protection account. Do you know what the penalty is for that? Mr. Vance." Vance loosened his collar. He couldn't speak. "We are done here," I said. I walked out of the bank. The sun was shining, but I felt cold. I realized then that Mason was right. This wasn't just about money. This was about cleaning a stain. As we got into the black sedan waiting at the curb, my sedan, paid for by my security team, Mason called me. "Skyla," he said. His voice was urgent. "We found something in the timing." "What do you mean?" I asked, putting the phone on speaker so Elias could hear. "The eviction notice," Mason said, "and the final demand from the loan shark, and the hospital deposit requirement. We ran the metadata on the communications, and they were all generated from the same server," Mason said. "They were automated. Someone didn't just wait for you to run out of money. They pushed you. They hacked the hospital billing system to demand the deposit early. They bought your debt specifically to call it in yesterday." My blood ran cold. "They forced me to the bank," I whispered. "It wasn't bad luck. It was a cattle chute." "Exactly," Mason said. "They knew the year 7 deadline was coming. They knew you were stubborn, so they created a perfect storm of financial ruin to force you to use that card on the one day the account unlocked." I looked out the window at the passing city, the buildings, the streets, the people. It all looked like a stage set now. My entire life had been manipulated, first by Alec, to protect me, and then by his enemies, to expose me. I was sick of being a pawn. "What is the next move, Mason?" I asked. "The next move just arrived at my office," Mason said grimly. "A federal marshal just dropped off a subpoena." My heart stopped. "For me, for Jane Doe, beneficiary of the Reynolds Trust," Mason said. "You have been summoned to appear before the U.S. District Court in Jacksonville, tomorrow morning, 900 hours. "What is the charge?" Elias asked from the seat beside me. "No charge," Mason said. "Witness testimony. They are reopening the RICO case against the Infrastructure Consortium. The grand jury has been convened." "Why now?" I asked. "The statute of limitations." "Because a new witness has come forward," Mason said. I felt a chill go down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "The subpoena doesn't say," Mason said. "But it lists a co-witness, a man named Arthur Penhaligon." "I don't know an Arthur Penhaligon," I said. "Neither do I," Mason said. "But I ran a background check. Arthur Penhaligon doesn't exist before 6 years ago. No birth certificate, no school records, just a sudden appearance in a small town in Oregon." I closed my eyes. Alec, he had changed his name. He had changed his life. But he had come back. "He is coming out of the dark," I whispered. "He is coming to testify," Mason said. "And Skyla, if he steps into that courtroom, the people who have been hunting him will know exactly where he is. He is using himself as bait. Why? To draw the fire away from you," Mason said. "Phase 2 wasn't just you attacking them. It was him exposing himself so you could take the shot." I looked at the silver drive in my hand. I looked at the files Elias was holding. Alec was going to walk into a federal court to save me again. He was going to sacrifice his safety, his new identity, everything he had built. just to make sure the monsters didn't come after me. "Turn the car around," I told the driver. "Where are we going?" Elias asked. "Jacksonville," I said. "We are going to court." "Skyla, that is dangerous," Mason said over the phone. "If you go there, you are walking into the crossfire." "I am not walking into the crossfire," I said, my voice steady and hard. "I am bringing the ammunition." I looked at the reflection of my eyes in the rearview mirror. They didn't look tired anymore. They looked like Alec's eyes used to look before the rain. They looked like steel. "He thinks he is saving me," I said. "He thinks he is the hero of this story. He is wrong." I gripped the door handle. "I am the hero," I said, "and I am going to save him, whether he likes it or not." "Step on it," I told the driver. "We have a reunion to attend." The federal courthouse in Jacksonville is a fortress of limestone and glass, designed to make you feel small before you even step through the metal detectors. The air outside was thick with the scent of rain and exhaust fumes. I adjusted the lapel of my navy suit. It was a sharp contrast to the terrified woman in the peeling blazer who had stood in a bank lobby just 48 hours ago. Reporters were already swarming the steps. The resurrection of the RICO case against the Infrastructure Consortium had leaked, likely thanks to Elias Thorne. My shark of a lawyer. Cameras flashed like lightning storms as I walked up the stairs. Flanked by my security team, they didn't know who I was yet, just a mysterious woman named in a subpoena, but they smelled blood in the water. "Keep walking," Elias murmured near my ear. "Do not look at the lens. Look at the horizon." I pushed through the heavy oak doors of courtroom 4. The room smelled of floor wax and old paper. It was packed. The gallery was filled with men in expensive suits, the consortium's fixers, the bank's lawyers, the people who had been eating steak dinners while my mother skipped doses of her medication. I took my seat at the witness bench. My hands were folded on the table, steady and cold. Then, the side door opened. A hush fell over the room. It was the kind of silence that happens when a ghost walks in. A federal marshal stepped out first. Behind him walked a man. He was limping slightly, favoring his left leg. His hair was different grayer, cut short in a military style that exposed the sharp angles of his face. He was thinner, his suit hanging a little loose on his frame. He wore wire-rimmed glasses that I had never seen before. But when he looked up, the breath caught in my throat. The eyes. They were the same piercing, intelligent blue that I had fallen in love with 12 years ago. They were the same eyes that had looked at me with cold contempt in the rain 7 years ago. Alec Reynolds, or as the court clerk announced him, Arthur Penhaligon. He didn't look at the gallery. He didn't look at the judge. He looked straight at me. For 7 years. I had rehearsed what I would do if I ever saw him again. I thought I would scream. I thought I would cry. I thought I would lunge across the room and claw his face. I did none of those things. I simply stared back. He walked to the witness stand. He swore on the Bible. He stated his name as Arthur Penhaligon, formerly known as Alec Reynolds. The gasps from the gallery were audible. The dead man was speaking. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Cheng, wasted no time. She walked him through the timeline, the fraud, the money laundering, the threats against his life, the threats against my life. "Mr. Penhaligon," she asked, "why did you stage your death?" "Because the people sitting in the back row," Alec said, pointing a steady finger at the consortium's lawyers, "sent me a photograph of my wife's car with a red target painted on the windshield. I had to become a ghost so she could become invisible." "And the money?" Ms. Cheng asked. "The account in Tampa." "It was a trust," Alec said, "designed to mature on the day the statute of limitations for asset seizure expired. Yesterday, then it was the defense's turn. The lead attorney for the consortium, a man named Sterling who looked like he was carved out of oil and malice, stood up. He didn't go after Alec. He came after me." "Mr. Penhaligon claims he did this for love," Sterling sneered, turning to face me. "But let us look at the beneficiary, Ms. Morales, or should I say, the estranged wife, who was paid $10,000 to go away. He walked toward me, invading my personal space. Ms. Morales, Sterling said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Is it not true that you accepted a debit card from your husband 7 years ago? Is it not true that this so-called trust is actually just a payoff, a way to buy your silence regarding his criminal activities? He was trying to paint me as a co-conspirator, a gold digger who was in on the con. Did you earn that money, Ms. Morales? Sterling pressed. Or was it payment for services rendered? The old Skyla would have stuttered. The old Skyla would have felt the shame rising in her cheeks. I stood up. I did not earn it, I said. My voice rang out clear and hard, cutting through the murmurs. And I did not spend it. That card sat in a shoebox for 7 years while I scrubbed toilets and worked double shifts to pay for my mother's dialysis. I reached into my briefcase. Elias handed me the folder, the one containing the data from Phase 2. And as for silence, I continued, I am afraid you are mistaken. I am not here to be silent. I am here to submit evidence regarding the chain of custody at the downtown Tampa branch of Sovereign Bank. I slapped the file onto the railing of the witness box. This file contains the internal communications of Mr. Vance, the branch manager, and a teller named Tiffany Ames. It proves that yesterday, at 12:15, Mr. Vance attempted to stall my withdrawal on orders from a holding company linked to your client, Mr. Sterling. It proves that the bank is not a neutral party, it is a laundromat. Sterling's face went pale. Objection, he roared. This is ambush. This is irrelevant. It goes to the credibility of the financial institutions involved, I shouted back, overriding him. And it proves that Alec Reynolds did not buy me. He armed me. The judge slammed his gavel. Order, Miss Morales. Approach the bench. I walked up. Alec was sitting 3 feet away. I could smell the faint scent of the soap he used, no longer the expensive cologne, but something simple and clean. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't place. It was awe. Ms. Morales, the judge said, looking over his spectacles. You claim the bank compromised the account. They tried to, I said. They claimed the containment envelope with the final authorization code was missing. It is not missing, the judge said calmly. He reached under his bench and produced a thick, sealed envelope. It was battered and yellowed with age. It was delivered to my chambers via courier this morning, the judge said. Sent by an anonymous attorney in Clearwater. Mason. He had moved the piece before Vance could destroy it. This, the judge said, holding it up, contains the final stipulation of the Reynolds Trust. Mr. Reynolds or Mr. Penhaligon has stated that the funds cannot be released until this document is read into the record and signed by you. Read it, I said. The judge broke the seal. He unfolded a single sheet of paper. The stipulation reads, the funds in this account, totaling $2,942,000, are to be released to Skyla Morales solely upon her signature. By signing, she acknowledges that this money is not spousal support. Nor is it a settlement. It is an instrument of independent agency. The judge paused, adjusting his glasses. However, the beneficiary must also acknowledge that by accepting these funds, she accepts that the grantor, Alec Reynolds, acted under duress to protect her life, and that all marital bonds were severed not out of malice, but out of necessity. She is free. The debt is paid. The past is closed. The room was silent. Sterling looked like he had swallowed a lemon. The consortium couldn't touch the money. It was legally clean, but the emotional weight of the clause hit me like a physical blow. Alec wasn't buying me back. He was setting me free. He was asking me to sign a paper that said, essentially, I forgive you for destroying me because you saved me. I looked at Alec. He was gripping the railing of the witness stand. His knuckles white. He looked terrified. Not of the cartel. Not of the prison time he might face for the fraud he committed years ago. He was terrified of me. He was terrified I wouldn't sign, or worse, that I would sign it and walk away without understanding. Ms. Morales, the judge said, are you prepared to sign I looked at the paper, then I looked at the gallery. I saw the faces of the men who had made my life hell, the men who had automated my eviction, the men who had turned my mother's illness into a leverage point. I will sign, I said. I took the pen. But I want the record to reflect something, I said, turning to face the camera at the back of the room. I am not signing this because I accept his apology. I am signing this because the money in this account is the only thing that can burn the people in this room to the ground. I signed my name, Skyla Morales. The letters were sharp and jagged. Phase 2 is complete, I whispered. The gavel banged. The next hour was chaos. Federal marshals moved in to arrest 3 of the consortium executives based on the data in the USB drive I had submitted. Sterling was served with an obstruction of justice charge right there in the aisle. The press was in a frenzy. I walked out of the courtroom, my team flanking me. Skyla, the voice came from behind me. I stopped. I signaled the security guards to stand back. Alec was standing in the corridor. He was handcuffed, flanked by 2 marshals. He was being taken into protective custody. Or maybe to a holding cell until his own plea deal was finalized. He looked older than his years. The stress of the last decade was etched into the lines around his mouth. We stood there, 5 feet apart. The distance felt infinite. You came, he said softly. You brought the drive. I brought the gun, I corrected. Just like you told me to. He looked at my suit. He looked at the way I stood shoulders back, chin high. You look. He searched for the word. You look dangerous. I am dangerous, I said. I have $3 million and the best lawyer in Florida, and I have a list of names. I am sorry. Sky, he said. His voice cracked. I am sorry for the rain. I am sorry for the apartment. I am sorry for the noodles. I am sorry I couldn't be there. He took a step toward me, but the marshal held him back. I did it to save you, he pleaded. You have to understand. I threw you away so they wouldn't kill you. I looked at him. I felt the old love, the ache of it, trying to rise up. I remembered his laugh. I remembered the way he used to hold me. But then I remembered the shoebox. I remembered the cold nights. I remembered the humiliation of the bank teller. He had saved my life, yes, but he had also stolen 7 years of it. He had treated me like a child, a problem to be managed, an asset to be protected, rather than a partner to be trusted. You threw me in the mud to save me, I said, my voice low and even. I know that. Alec, I read your notebook. I saw your maps. I stepped closer, until I was right in his face. But you made a mistake. You thought that if you broke me, I would stay broken until you came back to fix me. You thought I was a character in your script. I leaned in, my lips inches from his ear. I am not your character anymore. I am the author, and I am not going to live by your script. I pulled back. I signed the paper, I said. I took the money, but not because I forgive you. I took it because I am going to use it to start a foundation, a fund for families crushed by medical debt, for people like my mother. I am going to use your blood money to heal the wounds you helped create. Alex stared at me, A mixture of pain and pride washed over his face. He realized then that he hadn't just saved his wife. He had forged a stranger. Goodbye, Arthur, I said. I turned my back on him. Skyla, he called out. Where are you going? I didn't look back. I walked down the marble hallway, the heels of my shoes clicking a rhythm of absolute, terrifying freedom. I am going to finish the war, I said to the air. I walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding Florida sun. The reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Ms. Morales, how much is the settlement? Do you love him? Will you wait for him? I put on my sunglasses. I didn't answer them. I signaled to Elias. Get the car, I said. We have a hospital bill to pay, and then we have a bank to buy. I was no longer the woman who waited. I was no longer the woman who starved. I was Skyla Morales, and I had just cashed out. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. so please drop your location in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed Skyla's journey from the rain to the courtroom, please make sure to subscribe to Juliet Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that sometimes rock bottom is just the foundation for a skyscraper. See you in the next story.